Why did these investors invest in Theranos? Did they invest based on the representations, the allegedly fraudulent and false representations by Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes? Or was it based on recommendations from other investors? Well, stay tuned. I'll give you my analysis. Hi there, I'm Michelle Hagan. I'm a legal analyst and a former prosecutor. You may recognize me because I provided a lot of legal analysis on the Elizabeth Holmes case, the co-defendant of Sunny Balwani. And it's day 23 of the Sunny Balwani trial, and he's facing the same 12 counts. 6 related to defrauding investors, 4 relating to defrauding patients, and those 2 conspiracy counts relating to conspiring with Elizabeth Holmes, allegedly to defraud investors, and allegedly to defraud patients. So I'm going to give you the highlights of today's testimony. But before I do that, oh yeah, and I'm also going to show you some emails and that Fortune magazine article so you can make your own analysis, because you know me, I like to look at the actual evidence. All right, so before I get there, I just want to shout out to all of you who have subscribed and to please encourage you to subscribe to my channel to support my work. And a huge shout out to those of you who have contributed to me making these videos and valuing these videos. I truly appreciate it. And if you want to contribute, I'll put a link, a PayPal link in the description box below the video. Okay, so let me give you the highlights. So we had 2 witnesses so far testifying in day 23 of this Sunny Balwani trial. And by the way, this video is for education and information, and it's simply my opinion. So please do leave your analysis, leave a comment, and do subscribe. Hit that like button and hit the bell notification. Okay, the highlights. Let me back up a second here. What the defense is trying to do is the defense is trying to, I think, point the finger at someone else other than Sunny Balwani, right? And one of the things that the prosecution has to prove in both the 2 conspiracy charges and in the particular individual investor, I'm looking at the indictment, investor counts relating to these particular investors, which is Daniel Mosley, who invested $5.9 million, and Alan Eisenman, who invested relating to this count, it's $99,000. He's invested other money prior to that. But anyway, why does it matter? Why does it matter? What's the reason for them investing in Theranos? Well, the indictment says, did in knowingly and intentionally conspire and agree together, Balwani and Holmes, with each other to commit fraud by devising a scheme and artifice to defraud as to a material matter and to obtain money by means of materially false and fraudulent representations. So, if the defense can show, in my opinion, and I think they did somewhat today, if they can show that these investors made their investment decision based on something other than the representations made by Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes, then maybe that's reasonable doubt. Then maybe the jury could find prosecution hasn't proved their case. All right, so what did the defense do today on cross-examination? Well, let me tell you the highlights. First of all, just to back up a second here again, on direct examination, Daniel Mosley, who's an investor, he's also an attorney, and he referred several of his clients to the tune of, I think it was $324 million or so that also invested in Theranos, based on the referral from Dan Mosley. But in particular, the reason he's testifying is because his testimony goes to count 8, which relates to that $5.9 million that he invested in Theranos on October 31st in 2014. So the question is, why did he invest in Theranos? Did he invest in Theranos based on the representations that Sunny Balwani made regarding, Sunny Balwani's case? Or Elizabeth Holmes? Did he make in his investment based on other reasons? Or did he encourage or recommend other investors to invest in Theranos? Again, getting to that point about raising possible reasonable doubt. Okay, so on direct exam, Mosley said that he recalls he learned about Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes through Henry Kissinger, who was a client of Daniel Mosley. And I'm pretty sure Kissinger recommended that he look into Theranos and let him know what he thought. So Mosley considered personally investing after a call with Elizabeth Holmes and receiving a packet. No doubt it's that binder with those reports, the financials, and everything else that Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes sent out to potential investors. So Mosley says he also introduced several of his clients to Elizabeth Holmes about potentially investing in Theranos. Some of them met her through me, through Mosley, but that was the extent of my role. That's what he testified to in direct examination. Well, what happened in cross-examination? Well, in cross-examination, the Balwani's counsel pointed out that he had written a memo. Mosley had written a memo to several of his clients that he had prepared. The memo was prepared for Henry Kissinger in December of 2014, and Mosley said that he called Theranos a deal with Walgreens. He called the deal with Walgreens brilliant. That's what he said in the memo. But it would be helpful to get more details on the deal, is what he said in the memo to Henry Kissinger. Okay? And what else did they do in cross-examination? So Mosley admitted that he introduced his wealthy clients, who together invested more than $375 million. It wasn't 324. It was $375 million in Theranos. So he introduced his wealthy clients to Elizabeth Holmes, but he said that he did not encourage them. He did not encourage them to invest. Then he said that he again repeated he didn't encourage his clients to invest in Theranos. And then Balwani's counsel, the defense counsel, pointed out in his October 2014 email, in which he wrote that he trusted Holmes, and if he didn't, he wouldn't be recommending clients to invest. Okay, now why is that important? That's important because if people invested in Theranos based on the recommendation of Daniel Mosley, not based on anything Elizabeth Holmes or Sunny Balwani represented about the technology, about the blood testing, about the finger testing, then maybe that's enough reasonable doubt, right? Because the prosecution has to show that they obtained the money based on false and fraudulent representations by Holmes and Balwani. Well, if they're investing based on what Daniel Mosley recommended or encouraged, then maybe that's reasonable doubt. And in particular, I'm going to show you an email. Actually, I'm going to show you the Fortune article that Daniel Mosley sent to Jeffrey, I think it's Jeff Tubergen. I'll get to it. I'll clean this up. But anyway, he was the advisor to the RDK, which is the DeVos family, which was the $99 million that they invested, which is count 5 or 6. It's count 7. I wasn't even close. It's count 7. The DeVos family invested $99 million. Well, if the defense can show that the reason the DeVos family invested that $99 million, which is the lion's share of these counts of loss, right, that the prosecution alleges, if they can show that there's some doubt there, reasonable doubt as to why the DeVos family invested in Theranos, then maybe they can kick out that count, right? They can say that maybe they're going to argue, maybe the defense will argue that the RDK, the DeVos family, invested that $99 million based on the recommendation of Daniel Mosley, not based on anything that Elizabeth Holmes or Sunny Balwani said. I don't know. So what else did they do? And I'll show you that email and that Fortune article in a second. So on redirect, which I call rehabilitation, the prosecution asked Dan Mosley he asked him if his meetings with Holmes and Balwani contributed to his decision to invest. He said, yes, absolutely. So why is the prosecution asking Mosley if it contributed, those meetings with Holmes and Balwani, in other words, the conversations, the statements that Balwani and Holmes made, contributed to his decision to invest? Again, the prosecution is trying to say his decision was based on the statements. He's trying to point the finger. Prosecution is trying to point the finger at what statements Holmes and Balwani made, not on the statements that were put in Roger Parloff's Fortune magazine article or anything else that Daniel Mosley, right? So they're trying to isolate the decision to invest based on the statements that, or the misrepresentations allegedly, that Elizabeth Holmes and Sonny Balwani made. Okay, so what else did they do? When they asked him about did he encourage clients to invest, he said obviously it wasn't a good use of words, relating back to his memo about recommending. Clearly, I was discussing it with them, but I'm a lawyer. I'm not an investment advisor, and I would not recommend an investment. So Mosley, prosecution's trying to rehabilitate Mosley here by saying he didn't make any recommendation to these investors, in particular the DeVos family, right? Because if they kick out that DeVos family count 7, that 99 million, if you go back to the video I did on the defense does damage, I did that calculation, the calculation of if they're able to kick out that count relating to the DeVos family, which is the lion's share of the amount of loss, that's 4 years less that Balwani potentially is looking at generally, okay? So it matters, right? So you can see, or I can see, and hopefully you're getting the drift here, that the defense is trying to poke holes, right? They're trying to say that the decision to invest was based on something other than the representations made by Balwani or Holmes. Okay, so the next witness is Alan Eisenman. And I'll show you some of his emails because they're interesting. And by the way, Eisenman did say he sent that email to the FBI saying that he would do all he could to help them with their case. Now, that's not helpful in the sense of going into the category of discrediting, potentially discrediting a witness's credibility, right? When that potentially they could argue it shows, the defense could argue it shows bias. Eisenman's going to do whatever he can, right? Does that mean he's going to lie on the stand? He's going to make stuff up when he testifies? I don't know, but the defense could say, why did he send that memo? And I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so on direct, Eisenman said that he was told that Theranos would generate $200 million in revenues annually and that Theranos tests were, quote, flawless, like a 747 taking off. Well, Eisenman is count 3 of the indictment, and that's the $99,000 he invested on December 30th, 2013. Okay, so he's another one of the investor counts that the prosecution has to prove beyond reasonable doubt, along with Daniel Mosley, in order to convict Balwani of these investor counts. So let me show you the Fortune article, because Mosley testified that he read it. Lisa Peterson testified that she read it, and they relied on the Fortune magazine article written by Roger Parloff. Okay, I'm looking at this, analyzing it, thinking, well, is there ways that they could raise reasonable doubt? So let's look at these emails and let's look at those articles. And did these investors, did Eisenman make his decision to invest based on what Elizabeth Holmes and Sonny Balwani represented to him? Or was he making his investment in Theranos based on who else was investing or the return on his investment? Was Daniel Mosley investing because of all the other wealthy clients that were investing in Theranos? Or was he investing based on the representations? Or was he investing based on something else? Okay, again, that goes to defense. The strategy here is to point the finger at and present other reasons why I think this is what they're doing. Other reasons why they invested in Theranos. Okay, to point the finger away from Sunny Balwani. All right, so let's look at these, and I highlighted um, some of these emails and the Fortune article. Okay, so this is from Daniel Mosley. He's the investor who invested the 5.9 million, the attorney investor. He's sending, it was Jerry Tubergen, who was the investment advisor to the DeVos family. Okay, and if you go back to the video I did regarding Lisa Peterson, where I pointed out, it's the video regarding did the defense discredit the DeVos investor? Okay. So here is Daniel Mosley reaching out to a potential investor, which would be the DeVos family, in September of 2014. What does he do? He sends Jerry the Fortune magazine article, and here it is. And by the way, Lisa Peterson, who was the witness who testified on behalf of the RDK Corporation, the DeVos family, she testified that she read this, and so did Daniel Mosley. Okay, so here's the article that Roger Parloff wrote, and you can go ahead and read it. I'll try to scroll through it slowly here. And what were the statements that were contained in here? And you can go ahead and read this, but I pointed out the highlighted sections. Let me go to them. So in this article that was written by Roger Parloff, based on the interviews that he had with Elizabeth Holmes, and by the way, Sunny Balwani is mentioned and quoted in this article. So he also makes statements that were read by Lisa Peterson and Daniel Mosley. It says right here, Theranos it currently offers more than 200 tests, all without the need for a syringe. Was that true? Or was that false? Just a few drops. Was that true? Was that a true statement? Draw it with a finger stick. Many as 70 different tests from a single draw. Was any of those statements true? And again, the defense could point out, this is Roger Parloff's statements, right? If they're relying on Roger Parloff's article, maybe they're not relying on what Elizabeth Holmes said to them or Sunny Balwani said to them. Again, pointing the finger at Roger Parloff based on this article. The results of the Theranos tests are available within hours. You know, it goes back to what the prosecution has been alleging. Is it fast, accurate, reliable? Were these tests or were they not? Was that just a misrepresentation? Did it cost less? Again, 70 tests on a sample this size. Was that true? I think several of the witnesses said no, that wasn't true. They weren't able to do those tests. And they did venous draws also. And here's that part about trade secrets again. You can read that. And then who was on the board? Again, were these people investing in Theranos based on who was sitting on the board? Like George Schultz, Mad Dog Mattis, several other people? Was that the reason? Were they investing because of wealthy clients? Were they investing because of Roger Parloff's article? Were they investing on that binder that Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani sent to potential investors, or meetings that they had with Holmes and Balwani? You can go ahead and read this. She talks about peer review validation wasn't necessary in her opinion. We did not buy any analyzers from third parties. Well, I think several witnesses have testified otherwise. So that doesn't appear to be a true statement. Didn't need FDA clearance, pages of validation. You can go ahead and read this. And then I will get to the part about Balwani's in here. She referred to the fact that since 2005, this is what Holmes said, Theranos had been doing work for major pharmaceutical companies, including Pfizer, GSK, and they were conducting clinical drug trials. Well, was that true at the time? At the time that these investors invested their money? I think the prosecution is alleging, no, it's not true. And they pointed out, why that those logos were misappropriated by Elizabeth Holmes, put on those validation reports that were presented to investors like Lisa Peterson and Daniel Mosley, and probably also Brian Grossman, who's also one of the investors that will be testifying soon. Okay, so here's Balwani's statement. Elizabeth had a very clear vision of where she wanted to take this since the time I met her, where she wanted to take the company, said Sunny Balwani, who met her in 2002 and has been Theranos' president since 2009. The business strategy, the tactics of what to do first, what to offer when, that has changed, but the overall goal and direction has been linear, according to Balwani, who founded his own e-commerce company in the 1990s. And he was expert in building software products. They talk about here about Holmes raising $400 million from investors. Holmes has continued to invent and upgrade her earlier inventions. Yes, but did they work? Did the technology work? And again, if investors are reading this article, can the defense show that they made their decision to invest based on the $400 million that had already been invested, based on who sat on the board? That's what they're trying to point out, I think. All right, so let's get to Alan Eisenman. So Alan Eisenman is the investor who invested $99,000, according to this indictment. He had invested, I think, over $1 million prior to this. But here's his emails to Elizabeth and Sunny Balwani trying to get an update on what's going on in Theranos. Now, this is in 2011. So this is 2 years and 3 years prior to these investor counts that are alleged in the indictment. But he's asking, after 2 months, he asks Elizabeth Holmes, after 2 months have passed without any updates on the tender or the business, can we schedule a call? He's the one that testified that he had quarterly calls with Elizabeth to find out what was going on. So his decision, I think the prosecution is going to argue, was based on those statements that Elizabeth Holmes made to him in those quarterly phone calls. But I think what the defense is going to point out is that the reason that Alan Eisenman invested is because of the return on his investment, right? Based on all these other people investing, right? Based on all the press that Theranos was getting. It wasn't based on any representation. It was basically based on the hype, right? The hype, the PR that Theranos was getting. So he's reaching out, and Sunny steps in here. This is tying Sunny to the investor count here. There's no quarterly update we provide. As mentioned to you before, we will send updates to all investors at the same time. So maybe the defense is saying Alan Eisenman is focused on his money, how much money he's going to make, not based on what's going on with the technology. Maybe that's what they're going to argue. Elizabeth steps in and responds, Alan sends to Elizabeth, you have provided a quarterly update to me and sometimes to other investors from the time I invested in Theranos over 4 years ago. So he was one of the early investors, so that would mean he invested in 2007. You also indicated that there would be the kind of information I was looking for when the tender materials were to be circulated. Now you have left us totally clueless. So it looks like Alan Eisenman is reaching out to Elizabeth Holmes trying to find out, well, how's my investment doing? As opposed to how the company's doing, maybe? Maybe that's what they're going to argue? And she responds back to Alan Eisenman, we have already responded to your emails, nothing more to add. Okay, so she's not sharing any information with him at this time. But then Alan Eisenman discovers a report that's done by UBS. They do an analysis of Theranos. They have their own expert. Just for completeness, I can't talk today, so my apologies. By the way, do subscribe to the channel. Do hit that like button and do share these videos. Okay, so it's just all their disclaimer, but I'm just for completeness. I want you to see the whole thing. Okay, so they have an analyst look at Theranos and what's their opinion of Theranos, right? Because they're evaluating it for their clients, for their investors, as to whether or not they want to invest in Theranos or not. So Alan Eisenman reads this and he gets concerned, so he sends an email to Elizabeth Holmes. And in particular, here's what the industry consultant for UBS says. Basically, our consultant believes it's highly unlikely that all these tests are being done on one machine. If the technology works as advertised, our consultant has felt that it could be a game changer. However, the model, as seen in a handful of Walgreens locations, has evolved into a traditional reference lab offering where blood is drawn mostly through venous draw and sent to a regional lab. So UBS's consultant figures out that it's not, basically, I think what they're saying here, it's not as it's advertised. They're taking venous draws. It's basically morphed into a traditional model, and it's highly unlikely that all these tests are being done. Alan Eisen reads this, and he reaches out to Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani. He says, Elizabeth and Sunny, this is October 8th, 2013. This is after he makes his investment. He says the link below will access the UBS report on Theranos. They claim that the blood samples have to be sent to Palo Alto. They are less reliable than traditional tests, and the turnaround time is over 24 hours. Hope to catch up soon. Best, Alan Eisenman. So right there, the defense could point out, well, Alan Eisenman knew that there was a problem, maybe. UBS is questioning things. And what does Sunny say? Sunny says, doesn't surprise us. Sounds like an uninformed consultant. So this ties Sunny to saying to Alan Eisenman, oh, don't listen to what UBS says. That's an uninformed consultant. Can the defense argue that that is further evidence of potential evidence of Sunny Balwani making fraudulent or hiding what was going on, right? Interesting email. So then Sunny, Alan responds back to Sunny, please clear up any inconsistency. So Alan's asking Sunny, clear it up. Is there, the UBS said the blood samples have to be sent to a lab. Bill Frist gave a talk earlier this year and said that the sample is put in a box that analyzes and digitizes and provides results in 20 to 30 minutes. He said the test is done in the cloud with software and there is no transportation cost and you don't need a lab. That's what he claims, Alan Eisen claims, that Bill Frist said. Also, I'm waiting for my post-stock split. So again, the defense could say, hey, Alan Eisenman is investing in Theranos because of the money he thinks he's going to make, the return on his investment. The other thing that's interesting about this is if Alan Eisenman is saying that that Bill Frist gave a talk and made these representations over a year earlier, so this would have been approximately November of 2013, maybe it's around the time that he invested in Theranos, that maybe the defense could say Alan Eisenman made his decision to invest based on what Bill Frist said at that talk, not based on what Sunny Balwani said. I don't know. It's just something I'm pointing out. You can let me know what you think. What's your analysis? So please do leave a comment. So Sunny says, Alan, I have no intention of responding to this email and explaining the technology and the processes. So again, that's twice now that Sunny Balwani is shutting him down. Sunny's not making any representations here, but he's not going to explain anything to Alan Eisenman. I don't know. Does that go to conspiracy to defraud? Does that go to defrauding Alan Eisenman? And then Elizabeth says to Sunny, he has been emailing us again every day. This email also points to the fact that, it could be argued that Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes knew that there was a problem here. Alan Eisenman was letting them know, but they didn't want to talk about it. I don't know. We'll have to see what the defense does with this. Okay, so here's another email, and this was offered by the defense in the Holmes case. And I think this points to what was the real reason that Alan Eisenman invested. Was it based on the representations that Balwani and Holmes made, or was it based on the amount of money he thought he could make? So I'll just show you this quickly here. So this is an investment firm in San Francisco that Alan Eisenman is reaching out. He wants to find out what his shares of stock are worth. This is in September of 2015. This is after Yeah, I think it's still within the window of dates that the prosecution alleges the conspiracy happened. But he's asking, Alan Eisenman is reaching out to find out. I wanted to make sure you received all the documentation to list my Theranos shares for sale. So Alan Eisenman was getting ready to sell his shares of stock. Why? Was it because of the statements, because of the problems with Theranos, or was it because he was concerned about the stock price? So again, did he make a decision to invest because he was investing in Theranos, or was he investing because of his hope for a good return? Because of all these other people, these wealthy people were investing. You can go ahead and read this. And then he says, what's the net price I can expect for my stock? This is in September of 2015. So, I think the defense offered that to show, and they did argue in the Holmes case, that some of these investors were investing based on the profit they could make, not based on the technology or not based on anything Elizabeth Holmes said or Sonny Balwani. It was all the hype in the press, and the stock prices were going up, and the people that were investing and the people that sat on the board. Okay, here's the other thing that I think, I don't know, in the Holmes case, if you remember, 3 of these counts she was convicted of. 3 of the counts the jury hung on, meaning they couldn't make a decision on. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be able to convict on this Alan Eisenman count, which is that count 3, that $99,000. Because look what he says. Here's an email he sends to the FBI. He turns over his computer to the FBI in that last sentence. You know that I am a faithful part of your team. I am a faithful part of your team and will do all I can to help your case, Alan. Here's a witness who's telling the prosecution basically through the FBI that he'll do all he can to help their case. Well, I think the defense could clearly argue with this email that Alan Eisenman said, that shows that he has a bias or a potential bias, that maybe he's not being truthful on the stand. Maybe he has an axe to grind with Elizabeth Holmes and Sonny Balwani. Maybe he's going to make up his testimony. So, maybe that's why the jury in the Holmes case couldn't make a decision regarding the count relating to Alan Eisenman. But they did convict Elizabeth Holmes of defrauding investors, right? So the question is, what do you think? What do you think about these emails? What do you think the real reason is that Alan Eisenman and Daniel Mosley invested in Theranos? Was it based on, did Holmes and Balwani obtain money based on the representations that they made to these investors, or were these investors investing because of who else was investing? The DeVos family invested based on the article that they got from the statements, the article that Roger Parloff made, that they realized that Daniel Mosley was investing, that other wealthy investors were investing, those $375 million worth of clients that Daniel Mosley made to Theranos, that those people invested in Theranos? Can the prosecution show, that the investment decision was based on the misrepresentations of Elizabeth Holmes and Sonny Balwani? What do you think? What's your analysis? Please do leave a comment. Please hit that like button. Do subscribe to this channel. Please support my work. These videos are a lot of work. And thank you so much. Big shout out to all of you who have contributed to supporting these videos. And if you want to contribute, I'll put a link to PayPal in the description box below the video. So thanks again for supporting my work, for supporting these videos, and for subscribing to this channel. Thanks again for watching.